excited for you all to learn a bit more about Jevata Herman and some of the shifts and sacrifices she has made for the things that she loves. Good morning, Jevata. We welcome you to the Creative Morning stage.
Good morning, everybody.
So if you have the ability to unmute, let's say a quick welcome to Jevata. Welcome to our stage.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, take it away.
Welcome to Creative Mornings, RBA. Happy Friday. So I'm a creative, so I can be a little loud. I can be a little, kooky at times, but thank you so much for having me. First, when when Lindsay asked me, I was like, are you sure? Which story do I tell? And so as Nadia shared, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, born and raised, product of Richmond Public Schools. I graduated from TJ High School, Thomas Jefferson. And the product of a single mom. She worked for Verizon for 32 years. And my mom came from that generation where she believed you work a good job, you work till you're 65. And there were no entrepreneurs in my family. And so for me, that wasn't the route I wanted to take because honestly, my mom hated her job. She came from the generation of you work till you're 65, you have that stability. But every day she came home, she complained. And so many of her peers, they were like, you work a good job, not G-O-O-D, but G-O-O-D-T, good job. And so I decided that that wasn't the path I wanted to take. So before we get started, I want you to grab a sheet of paper and I want you to get your favorite pencils, crayons, or ink pens. And on a piece of paper, I want you to write the word pivot. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute to do that because there are lots of pivots and changes in my life. And so as I share my journey, I want you to hold up your sign. If something I say resonates with you, if something I say you can identify with, or you're inspired by, because through our life and through our journey, you'll find that you'll get to different points where you have to pivot. Some of the things may hurt a tad, some of the things may be uncomfortable. Some of the things may, really provoke you to make a decision because it's that fork in the road, right? And so that's what my conversation will really spin from today, pivots in my life and the different changes in my life. So does everybody have their sign? Are you ready to go? Thanks. So Lindsay made a fancy Creative Morning sign. All right. So anywho, I decided to get into hair, but my journey was not one that I necessarily chose or had planned for myself. In that my mom was like, you're good in math and science. Why don't you consider, computer programming or becoming an engineer? And I attended Rap Me and different programs like that. And I was just like, yeah, this is not it. And so we went through a couple of bumps in the road as a teenager, and our relationship was somewhat strained. And so I decided to run away for 6 to 9 weeks. Yes, I ran away. And I ran to my best friend's house. And my mom was like, well, if you're going to do that, I won't support you financially. You have to get a job. And we were in communication, but I was just kind of rebelling, so to speak. And so if you have children that are teenagers, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. I pray that they don't run away. But anywho, I went to stay with my best friend. And during that time, I didn't want to work in retail. I didn't want to work in fast food. So I went to work in my childhood friend's grandparents' basement. Her grandparents had set up a salon in the basement because she had just moved back from Baltimore. And so 2326 Rosewood is where her grandparents live. And so if you know anything about the houses on Rosewood and Maplewood, the basements are solid. So he had a built-in bar where he put dryers on the surface. He took an old record player stand and made that her nail station. And so as her assistant, you know, I laid acrylic, I did nail polish designs, et cetera, et cetera. And so inevitably, as the clientele grew, her grandparents were like, you got to get out of my basement. There are too many people in here, you know. And so Dion went to Professionals Hair Salon owned by Glennis Crosby. Professionals was located on Main Street. If you know what the Jefferson Hotel is, it's cat a corner to that on Main. And so as her assistant, I went to the interview and Glennis was like, you know, you guys need to go to the Richmond Technical Center and enroll in the apprenticeship program because you have to have formal training. You just can't work in the salon, right? Pivot, right? And so we went to work at Professionals. And when we went to Professionals, we were the youngest there. I was 16 and Dion was probably going on 18. And so I was a junior in high school. Oh, I went back home after the 6 to 9 weeks too, by the way. And so when we started working at Professionals, I was a junior in high school. So simultaneously, I was going to the Richmond Technical Center on Mondays and I was going to TJ, of course. And then I got my hands-on training in the salon. And so got my license. And then that January after graduating from high school, I passed the state board and got my cosmetology license. And so at that point, I started noticing in the industry, there were a lot of other trends and, you know, styles and things that I didn't know how to do that I wanted to learn how to do. And one of the things that really inspired me to grow and get outside of the salon where I was that I wanted to learn more about hair color. And so as Blacks with curly hair, during that time, natural hair, the movement was not really a thing. So natural hair wasn't a term then. You either had curly hair, you had straight hair. Yes. And so, you know, for me, understanding with little experience, we didn't have Dyson blow dryers. We didn't have babyless flat irons. So a lot of the technology of products and chemicals we have today, we didn't have back then. And so in my limited experience, I didn't see a lot of Black women with hair color that we have now. And I began to reach out to other stylists. I began to go to different hair shows and attend different expos just to try to learn more about hair color for Black women. And so that also led me to go and work at another salon. Pivot. And so at this time, I went to work at Nesbitt. How many of you are familiar with Nesbitt Salon on Cary, Maine? I'm sorry. And so I was going through a divorce at the time. I had 2 daughters and I went to work at Nesbitt. And so during this time, my mom was like, you know, yes, that's stable. You're going to get a salary with benefits. You should definitely do that. And so for me, it was such an eye-opening experience because Nesbitt was just so far ahead of their time. It was like a full service wellness experience. It was over probably 175 to 100 employees, 3 buildings. It was massive. So it took me away from the mom and pop salon experience that I was accustomed to, out of my comfort zone. I was the only Black stylist there with very limited experience compared to some of the people that I was going to work with, right? But as you know, in order to grow, you got to come out of your comfort zone and be open to learn some things. And so I used to be late. I used to be late all the time. It was bad. And so one day I remember one of the owners just really getting in my stuff and was just like, you know, you need to be here at 8:45 for the morning huddle. And if your client is waiting at 9, you are late. And so I was just like, okay. And so while that was very uncomfortable, it helped me to understand, like, professionally, you can't have your guests waiting. You need to be there early. And so a lot of the things that I learned early on in my career, while I didn't appreciate it then, I appreciate it now, 30 years later in the industry. And so I worked there for about 4 years. And so I could tell a pivot was coming because you begin to get a little uncomfortable. And it's not necessarily a reflection on the people that are in that space. It's more so a reflection on your life and that time to pivot, right? And so for me, I knew that ultimately I wanted to own my own salon. I knew that I wanted to have more freedom. And I think the icing on the cake for me that really pushed me into that decision was one day my daughter got sick. How many of you have kids? And so you know that feeling when you have children and the school calls, when you see that number come up on the caller ID. Well, in this case, I was on the styling floor. So they came out on the floor. Your daughter's sick. She's throwing up. You got to go and pick her up. So I'm like, fine, I'll go home. And they were like, no, go get her, bring her back to the call center, and you got to finish working. And I'm like, what? And so I went to get her because I had an evening full of clients that no one else could service because, again, I was the only Black stylist at the time. And so for me, that made me feel a little uncomfortable. I went to get my daughter. She was in the back with the manager in the call center. And so for me at that moment, I also knew, okay, this had to change because I didn't like the way it made me feel, right? And so I wanted more freedom. I wanted the freedom that if my daughter got sick, I wanted to take her home and I wanted to stay home and care for her. Yes, there were clients waiting on me, but I needed to do what was important to me. I wanted to create an environment where I could create my own choices, where I could pivot and make the decisions for the things that mattered the most to me. And as a single parent, yeah, right? You know that your children are relying on you. There was not a dad present at that time where I could say, okay, could you go get Jayla? She's sick. I needed to go and I needed to take care of her. And so at that point, I kind of started looking at buildings and stuff like that. And I found a space on Main Street. And so that was around 2004, November 2004. And so pivot. Jevata opens Jevata the Salon on Main Street. And so on my starting lineup, you know, on the basketball team, you have 5 people, right? So on my starting lineup, there's Jesus Christ, who's my Lord and Savior. I'm a woman of faith, whatever your jam is, wellness, you know, spirituality, but Jesus does it for me. All right. So my second player was Nadia Anderson because Nadia was my CPA. Hands up for Nadia. And so Nadia shared with me, okay, so this is what you were making at Nesbitt. You got a paycheck, you have benefits. Well, this is what you're going to need to take home to handle the expenses of the business as well as your household expenses. I had childcare and things like that. So I knew how many people I needed to see each day or each week or monthly, annually to make it work, right? And so I opened up the salon. I took my mom, showed it to her. I'll get back to that. On the third player on the team, the Ricci friend. And if you notice these little white boxes with the Jevata logo, she created that logo in 2004. And that logo has been repurposed over and over and over again since then. Here we are, 16 years later, 17 years later. And so next on the team, we had Jayla and then Ginger. That's my 5 starting lineup. And those were the people at that moment on the top of the list that really helped me to make that decision, to make an informed decision, to start my business and open up my own space that allowed me the freedom to provide for my family, but also to be present because that was important to me. I wanted to be able to go to programs. And if I was booked up 3 months at a time, that's a great thing, but I needed that balance, right? And so fast forward to 2008. I was working at a salon on Broad Street, and on my way to Broad Street, I used to pass this building on 3rd. And I noticed there was a lot of activity, 3rd and Clay. And one of my friends was like, why don't you go and at least inquire about the space? And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. And eventually she asked every week because this is one of my friends and clients. And so, you know, you have that one friend who is kind of like, yeah, and you're like, I don't know about that. So anywho, because of her continual coming, I went to ask. And so the guy was like, oh yeah, it's available. You know, it's going to take $65,000, you know, to just put in the HVAC and sprinkler system. And I'm like, oh, okay. Out of my budget, but I'll humor myself and go and talk to a bank, right? Pivot. And they were like, sorry, Miss Herman, I'm sorry, you will not qualify for the kind of money you're going to need. So I went back deflated, heartbroken, and was like, see, I told you, you know. And she was like, well, you know, think about it, you know, revisit it, blah, blah, blah. So a year had passed. The building was still vacant. The same client and friend is just like, you know, have you revisited that space? I see some activity happening. I pass it, come in to get my hair done. I think you should call them back. Now, if you've ever experienced a little disappointment, sometimes the scab is healed and you don't necessarily want to go and pick it off because it's going to hurt and you're uncomfortable and you don't want to revisit that feeling of being disappointed again. Anywho, I call and the whole time I'm like, please don't answer, please don't answer, please don't answer. He didn't answer, but he left me a voicemail and his name was Ron Stallings. He used to be the owner of the space. And he was just like, Jevata, I have a great news. We've installed no, he didn't tell me. He said, come and see the space and you'll see, we got a surprise for you. I walk around the corner because I was literally on Fushi and Broad to 3rd and Clay, and they've installed the HVAC and the sprinkler system. And he was just like, we also opened up the opportunity for lease purchases because they weren't offering that before. And the price had dropped drastically. So a new member on my team was another client of mine and now friend, Tisha Wright, who's the owner of Ivy League Realty. And so she crafted this lease purchase agreement and she was like, are you ready? And I was like, but back up a little bit. It took 9 months to get this space ready, right? If you open a business in the city of Richmond, raise your hand. So you understand about permits and inspections, hurry up and wait. And imagine opening a business right now in the middle of a pandemic. I'll just say that. So anywho, Tisha was just like, let's fill out this lease. Let's, present them with our offer. But if they don't give us what we want, be prepared to walk away. Walk away? I don't want to walk away. I love this space. It's like all these windows and all this natural light. If they don't give us what we want, I want you to be prepared to walk away. And I'm like, all right, hit send. So she sends the offer, they accept. And so over the next 9 months after that, what I didn't know was that I would probably visit Lowe's almost as I did my own apartment, my own house, because you discover that in choosing lights, there's not only recessed lights, there are can lights, there are pendant lighting, and when I opened the space, when I got the space, there was a hole in the floor where the toilet used to be. There was no electricity and no plumbing. And I had no loan. The banks would not give me money because I didn't have credit. So write that on your pivot sheet if you're thinking about opening a business, because you need credit, but you also need business credit. So anywho, I went ahead, I met with contractors. They gave me the key and it gave me some months free because this was negotiated in that agreement that I would have X amount of months free to get the space turnkey. And so between electricity and plumbing, that was the bulk of it. Sheetrock, shampoo bowls, dryers, all the bells and whistles. And on December the 19th, 2010, I remember I had $236 in my account. Pivot. And I was ready to open up the salon the next day. December the 20th was opening day. December 19th, I got up that morning. I got a call from a friend and she was just like, well, Jevata, do you need any help? And I was like, yeah. Well, I have a lot of errands to run, but I think I got it. And she was just like, let me help you. And so your village will show up. Can I just say something to you? Let people help you. Oftentimes, it's like, I got it. I want to do it. And I'm kind of a control freak because the time it's going to take me to tell you what I need to do, I could have done it myself, but let people help you. I'll get back to that. And so they came, they showed up at the salon, they went to Target, they went to Marshall's, they went to Home Goods, they ran all these errands. So by 9 o'clock that night, it was almost ready. Backtrack. At 8 o'clock, I was in Target. I still needed toilet paper, paper towels, soap, a trash can, a few essentials to help my clients feel comfortable during their experience. And again, I only had $236. My list far exceeded $236, right? I don't know if Nadia knew this part of my story. She would probably be upset with me, but I'm going to share it anyway. And so my banker called and she shared with me, she said, Jevata, I can make a provisional deposit for you. Don't tell anyone. And I said, okay, what's that? And she said, well, the checks that you have deposited, if you know these people and you know they're good, I'll make that money available to you so that you can get the things that you need. It was a little bit after 8. I was literally in Target on Forest Hill. And I cried in Target and I put the stuff in my buggy and I went back to the salon. And so when I got back, we were able to get everything straight and then prepare for the salon opening. And so 2010, December 19th that night, I went to get my mom and took her to the space. I opened the door and she's just like, whose building is this? And I said, it's mine. And she was like, when did you do this? I said, over the last 9 months. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you would have a lot of questions that I did not have answers for. And sometimes when people ask you questions, it feels like, I'm trying to explain to you things that I don't have answers to. It can take away some of that confidence. And it's almost like you have to put that project in an incubator. When you put that project in an incubator, your goals and your dreams, you're protecting it from pollutants, you're protecting it from negativity, vibes, whatever you want to call it. But more so, you're empowering yourself. You're sustaining yourself because you've got to get the information you need. You've got to get the resources you need. And I don't have time to answer your 50 million questions because I may not have the answers to it. And so also, I wanted her to support me in a way that she knew how to. And then sometimes people don't know how it makes you feel or how you need to be supported. And so anywho, we opened up the next day and it was great. It was 5 days before Christmas. Pivot. Who does that? Who opens 5 days before Christmas? And so my kids were then maybe 11 and 12. And this past December 2020, I celebrated 10 years as a storefront business owner at Canvas the Salon. Praise Jesus, because that's a pivot. In a pandemic to celebrate 10 years as a storefront, this year 2020 was very challenging. And so during that time, I was thinking about, I wanted to celebrate safely. However, you couldn't really have people, maybe 10 people, we've been wearing masks a lot. And so I invited my team, my accountant, my realtor, my mom, and people who I've been around. We were able to socially distance and celebrate Canvas the Salon. And so as I began to think about it, I had a staff now, so I couldn't have it at the salon. And right next door to the salon, probably in August, this space became available right next door to the salon. And so checked it out, and here we are, Lily Black. And so Lily Black is my newest business venture. It's an event space, a private event space where you can rent for private events. Pivot. And so when you think about an event space, well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the history of this space. The building is located on 3rd and Clay in downtown Richmond, Jackson Ward. And when I celebrated 10 years, it was also 110 years ago that John Mitchell had opened Mechanics Bank here on 3rd and Clay. There's still a vault in the basement. And so John Mitchell and Maggie Walker created the Lily Black ticket. If you visit Lily Black RVA, you can read a lot about the history there of this space. And so this is the original structure of this building. After a few years, he lost the bank to Southern Insurance Company, and they built the remaining structure around the space is what we have now. So there's still the marble walls, there's still the marble slabs on the window sills, a lot of the original structure. It's a historic building. So I'm pretty excited to be able to be a part of this experience and history and the rich thread and fiber that is woven throughout Jackson Ward, because as many of you know, we have the 2nd Street Festival on 2nd Street during the fall, and that commemorates the rich legacy of Black businesses. When we weren't able to open businesses everywhere, 2nd Street is where Blacks could come and thrive and open their businesses and support their families. And the original owner, Ron Stallings, his dad was a realtor. He owned over 100 pieces of property. The Hippodrome and a lot of those buildings were his dad's. And so I'm so excited to share my story with you, because in our life, you'll find that you have different pivots, right? And in your life, you'll find that you'll have to pass the baton. And so as I pick up this baton here at Lily Black, I also want you to think about, who are you preparing to lead after you? Who are you preparing to fill your shoes and take the way? So when you're running a race, when you're running a marathon, and you're ready to pass that baton and they're reaching back so they can go forward, who are you reaching back to? As a member of the advisory board at Highland Springs Cosmetology Center, I've been on the board for 9 or 10 years. And during that experience, I've been able to help prepare young high schoolers for professional opportunities in the beauty industry. I've been able to share my experience. I've been able to talk to them and also offer them jobs and provide opportunities in my business or connect them with community partners to help prepare them as a professional beauty industry, a licensed professional beauty provider. So it's very important that you remember you also have to give back. You've got to be willing to pass that baton, so that when that person reaches back, you have something to give them. So I hope that my conversation today, if nothing more, has empowered you to pivot. Empower means to give you confidence. And sometimes in those moments when it hurts, when it's very difficult, when changes come in your life, it's uncomfortable, right? But I want you to remember, if nothing else, be empowered by the pivot. Yes, you may shed some tears. I had my tissue ready. I'm a crier, but understand you are empowered to pivot. All of these experiences help to shape you. And in Romans 8:28, one of my favorite scriptures is all things are working right for me. That's the Message version. It's all going to work out. When I was going through a divorce, when I opened up the salon the first time and now this location, when I opened up Lily Black, no, I don't have all the answers, but guess what? It'll all work out. So thank you so much for having me, Richmond. And you can find me at JevataHerman.com or LilyBlackRVA.com.
Thank you, Jevata. If you're in a place to unmute, if you'd like to share some love with Jevata, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we have time for questions and we are going to take them. So think about what you would like to ask Jevata. If you'd like to pop it in the chat, then we can unmute you if you're in a place to unmute, if you'd like to ask it yourself. Before we do that, I want to toss the Creative Morning shirt to our next host, and she will lead us through questions. So if you're ready.
Hi. Hey, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to lead us in some questions. And then I would like to talk just a little bit more about Creative Mornings going forward. But Jevata, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we are so excited to have you tell us a little bit more about Lily Black and about your experience. So I know that one question that's already come through is we want to know a little bit more about how you chose pivot. Like, obviously you've had quite a few different pivots in your life, and you've had a lot of different times that you have diverged off the path. What do you think is pivoting for you now and next?
So I chose the word pivot because when Lindsay and I talked about my talking points in my story, we were talking about how that's crazy. Like, so many times when I share different things and we went back to those talking points, we were like, that's crazy. And myself even, I'm like, yeah, that's crazy when I look back at it. But when we look up the word crazy, it meant deranged person. So I didn't want to use that. So we wanted to think of something that still had that same impact. And that's how we came up with the word pivot. Because when you look at it from the lens of pivoting, it's still crazy, but what do you do with the crazy? What do you do with those moments when it's uncomfortable, when you're vulnerable, when change is, brewing? You pivot, right? Either you lean into it or you fight it. And so I had to recognize sometimes just lean into that pivot, lean into the change.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure, did we see any other, I didn't see any other questions come through yet, but if somebody has a question for Jevata and you are in a place to unmute, feel free to do that now. and we can
I have a
you
question.
ask it. Yeah, please go ahead, Gentle.
So you had mentioned like the financial stuff of like starting a business and stuff like that. I too have been confused as to like the difference between like personal credit and business credit. How did you get over the like, I guess, hump of business credit? Because I'm 2 years in right now and nobody will still give me business credit. So I'm just curious if you have any tips.
Sure. Don't feel bad at all, because I didn't really start to establish business credit until honestly the last 3 years. And honestly, I didn't get my first credit card till late in my 30s, early 40s, honestly, because I made cash money. So I just paid for everything in cash, not recognizing I would need credit eventually. And so one of the lovely ladies in the city of Richmond, if you haven't availed yourself to her, her name is Pat Foster. She works with minorities and business development for the city of Richmond. So I would definitely reach out to her, because they have a lot of programs to help us understand that very thing. But she's one of my clients. So one day I was doing her hair and she shared with me, she said, Jevata, you need to apply for a secured business credit card to get started under your business tax ID number, so that you can start to establish business credit. And so that's one of the things that you can do. You can secure a tax ID number and get your secured card. But for me, I take Square payments, and under Square, I use my tax ID number for my business. And so Square monitors how much money you're bringing. And so that's one way you can establish business credit. And they also will give you capital based on the amount of money that you make. And so that's where I started to establish business credit, because they saw the volume, they saw the money that was coming in. And what happens with them is, say, for example, you take out a $10,000 loan from Square Capital, they take a percentage of each transaction. And so in a year, you can pay off $10,000 and you don't even see it, because every day they're deducting money from what you make. And it's not like you have to make a monthly payment. They're just eating away a little bit at it and it's gone. And you've already paid back $10,000. So that's a great way to establish business credit. And that's what I did.
Thank you so much. Those are some great ideas that I jotted down notes for.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nicole, you're next.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Something that really resonated with me that you talked about, and it actually like the chat blew up during it, was like protecting your dreams from, the negativity and questions, like the part where you didn't really tell your mom for a while.
Yeah.
I love that idea, because I feel like maybe I overshare, and then my dreams are kind of like nitpicked at before they even come to fruition. But you also talked about how like you had your tribe, and to also let them help when needed. Like, can you talk more about that balance of like protecting but also asking for help?
Yes. And so it's really, it's one of those things that, you learn over a period of time. I'm an oversharer. And so I would just blurt it all out, but it's one of those things where once you've been hurt before, and it's just like you pop a balloon and then you just have this shriveled up piece of plastic, right? And it's just like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep running into the same thing? And I've had a therapist now for 5 years, but before therapy, I think I just had to keep running to the brick wall, keep bumping my head, and understand like they can't give you something they don't have. She was raised in this generation where, this is just how she's programmed. My mom is 71 now. And so I had to get hurt a couple of times. I had to see where I may have shared something and it was shared with other people. And so in protecting the vision, it's not always about the negative as much as it is about yourself. The Bible says to guard your heart, because out of it flows the issues of life. And oftentimes it's about protecting your peace, but it's also like literally that baby in the incubator, and finding that balance, because when people show you who they are, you believe it. And so when you have people like Nadia in your life and they continue to show up, even on a raining, snowy, icy morning, when they show you the consistency and you can see that you can trust this person, give them a little bit at a time, and kind of spoon feed certain things. Allow them to show you that, and allow you to build your trust in them, to show you how much you can trust them with, because you're going to be hurt and it's okay and you'll overcome it. But will that thing move forward if you share it? And you have to ask yourself also, what's the fact and what's the goal? If I share it, what can they do? But you have to more so insulate yourself, because it's not so much about them as it is about you and that thing, because your village will show up, and all the clients who are now friends, my realtor, Tisha Wright, Nadia has been a childhood friend, since we grew up in church together. But you'll find people and threads in your life that are so consistent. And it's just like, why wouldn't you invite them in? Why won't you trust them? Had they hurt you before? Have they shown you that they're trustworthy? And so I think those are some things that will kind of help you to identify who you can trust. But also when people continue to show up, but first you have to show up, do the work on yourself. We have to be honest with ourselves to do the work on ourselves, because everybody is not out to get us. And one of the things I've learned in therapy is we awfulize. We think about the worst case scenario before something even happens. And this person is going to take your idea. So what? They get inspired. You're the secret sauce. Even if they take that same thing and they do it, it's not you. So have the courage to step out with your village, let them show you that they're trustworthy, and just do it.
Beautiful. Okay, our last question from Jenny. Jenny, if you want to pop on and ask your question, you can. And if not, it's in the chat. So Jenny asked, are there groups in Richmond you think are doing a good job helping build the next generation of leaders, or ways that folks can get involved with those types of efforts?
So there are lots of groups, and I would suggest that you do the homework to find out first, what is it that you need? Because you only get 24 hours in a day, right? And for me, I'm a little bit more selective about the groups, because I know what I need, and I know I have to be really intentional about, one, what I connect myself with, but two, I want to see your receipts. I want to see your fruit. What have you done? Who have you helped? That's kind of how I look at it. But there are a lot of groups out here that are doing a lot of stuff. And I'm sure that Nadia, Jolinda, and some of the Creative Morning teams can share some of that, but maybe more specifically what it is that you're looking for, and who's on that team or who are in those groups that are doing those things. But Creative Mornings is one of those places that is a safe space where you can come, and there are all types of people and all types of services and, professionals here. But I would have to think about specifically a list of groups to get back to you. So is that possible, Michelle?
Absolutely. We can do that, and we can share it in our social media. And Jacob even popped into the chat from our Richmond, our Raleigh-Durham chapter, that Creative Mornings also has field trips to take you globally and get more information about the things that we care about. But absolutely, for locally, Jevata, we can share those from you back out to the world.